Okay, that's our goal. Everybody's reading that together. Let's turn this Juliana, Jenny. Okay. Well, I'm excited. I know this a lot. Okay. How are you? Well, it's horrible. It's not that way. All right, let's get started. Brad? Okay. All right, let's get started. Ben?
Okay, it's starting.
Okay,
so.
I am so glad to see all of you guys here because this has been a really stressful experience for me. Very stressful. Most of you are aware that I am getting my master's degree in gifted education, and I have to do this presentation on a special population in gifted education. It's really been interesting because over the last, I started in August, but since I started this course in January, I just really have felt like I found the heavens opening calling of my life. I mean, I just can't stop thinking about it, I can't stop studying about it, and I really hope that the information that I prepared for you will actually help you with your kids. For many of you that I know really well, as I was reading through this, I actually thought of a couple of your kids and things that might apply to your kids. So after, you can come and talk to me and ask me, or you can email me about that. If you could please fill out the evaluation form. I know that that's a pain, but if you could please fill that out on your way out, I would really appreciate it. That's one of the requirements of the class. Anyway, I hope you have a great discussion. This isn't just a lecture. We have 4 women in this room who are, or 5, I guess, Melissa too, who are actually teachers, or have been, and one of whom was a gifted educator for a very long time. So I hope to have a lot of input from parents and a lot of help. And Dawn is one of my dear friends, and she's been tolerating a lot of information and text from me lately. But one thing about this subject about underachieving gifted kids is it's kind of a taboo subject. People are afraid to talk about it. Being gifted anyway in society is almost seen as a threat whenever you bring it up in front of anybody. They're afraid that you're threatening their abilities or whatever, but being born gifted is like being born 6 feet tall and with brown hair and brown eyes. There's nothing you can do to change it. It's just the way that you come. And so we're going to be addressing that. And not only that, but the topic of underachieving gifted is even more difficult for the achieving gifted to understand. So that's a topic that we're going to address tonight, too. First of all, I want to kind of explain a little bit about the IQ scale. I think a lot of you probably already understand that. But on the IQ scale, 68% of the regular population falls under average. A little bit above average, a little bit below average. And when we are talking about the gifted, we are talking about those who fall on this end of the scale. And the scale that they've kind of established is gifted. I'm going to read this to you. It says, these ranges are based on the standard bell curve. Most people fall in the range between 85 and 115, with 100 as the absolute norm. This range is considered normal. The farther away from the absolute norm of 100 a child is, the greater the need for special educational accommodations, regardless of whether the distance is on the left or on the right of 100. So for those of you who are educators in the classroom, how does that affect your perspective of that? How do they treat the kids that are under the bottom part of the bell curve, and how do they treat the ones that are above? Marilee, especially since you're a kindergarten teacher, how do they?
I don't see a lot that are challenged at the right other than what I do for them.
Right.
They're not really diagnosed or identified.
Because they're still so young.
Because they're so young. Usually in kindergarten I'll push for 2 or 3 kids on the bottom end that if I see them to get IEPs. And in our school, they let me do that.
So that's the bottom end?
Yes. But not much is going on in the upper end at this point. We challenge them. I challenge them. I usually get, ideas from other people, but from upper grades or from the teacher.
But there's nothing in here. There's not service in there. Okay, Robin taught early elementary school. What was your experience with them?
Well,
because you taught everyone in ELL school.
I taught ELL kids, and so I had kids that came in with IEPs because those kids were able to have access to preschool for free.
Right.
So most of them had already been placed in IEPs, but it's the same thing. It was a lot easier for me to get one or two of them on an IEP.
On the lower end.
On the lower end, and on the other end, it's very hard because they'll say, well, they're English language learners, how do you know? But I can tell you right now, the 2 or 3 that will always be gifted kids.
You can peg them.
Oh,
Some
you can
teachers
peg
can,
them.
some teachers can, some teachers
Yeah.
can't. Okay, Kelly, what was your experience? Because Kelly taught junior high, and she was actually a principal at the junior high level. So what was your experience
Junior
with
high,
that bell curve?
yeah, junior
and
high
the
is when
gifted
they
and the not
start diagnosing. That's the age where they're going through puberty, and I really feel like they start diagnosing. So we had a ton of IEPs at the lower end. At the higher end, they had a few classes for those kids that were advanced placement, but that's it. They're doing well. Why, mess what's not. Most of them did well.
Okay, that's something that we're going to address tonight, because I think that that's something that most people think about with the gifted. This is the definition that generally they operate under how we define gifted. Giftedness is a combination of advanced development and creativity. It is developmental in nature in that it begins as potential, generally in young people, evolves into achievement within recognizable domains during the school years, and becomes increasingly advanced compared with their peers. That's what's important right there. Through the non-universal development of the individual. Okay, that's the textbook definition of being gifted. There's other kind of variations to that. That's basically it. You're ahead of your peers. Somehow, intellectually, you're ahead of them. If you're a great basketball player and you're ahead of your peers, you rock. If you're intellectually ahead of your peers, it's a little stranger and it's a little harder to identify. This is something else I wanted you to think about and we were going to talk about tonight. This scale is how they define the gifted. We have the mildly gifted from 150 to 129 on the IQ scale. And gifted testing for intellect is very inconsistent. Is that the best word I can use, Dawn? Oftentimes you can score anywhere from a 120 to a 170, the same child, depending on the test, depending on the day. But this is just kind of an average. But the mildly gifted are the 115 to the 129, the moderately gifted up to 144. Genius level is usually considered 140. If you are over 140, then you can qualify for Mensa. So just so you know that. The highly gifted are 145 to 159, exceptionally gifted 160 to 179, profoundly gifted 180 and above. So that's how they break down the gifted. And as you get farther down this scale, the fewer there are. So we're talking the Einsteins, the really crazily gifted on that end. Well, this is the definition I wanted to add to that. This is the definition of underachievement. Underachievers are students who exhibit a severe discrepancy between expected achievement as measured by standardized achievement test scores or cognitive or intellectual ability assessments, and actual achievement is measured by class grades and teacher evaluations. To be classified as an underachiever, the discrepancy between expected and actual achievement must not be the direct result of a diagnosed learning disability and must persist over an extended period of time. This is the key to it right here. Because a lot of kids will take one semester, one teacher, and then the next year they're okay. But this discrepancy over an extended period of time is really what is going to label someone who has gotten caught in this underachieving gifted state. Come on in, Jen. This underachieving gifted state. I'm going to pull the scale back up for you. Oh, this is my awesome graphics. You're going to be really impressed by this. Okay, here's a general classroom. We've got your generally achieving kids. Now, achievement isn't necessarily defined by getting straight A's. Achievement is defined by getting the best that you can. So if you are an achieving student and you're getting straight A's, great. If you're an achieving student and you are getting A's and B's, great. If you're working really hard and you're getting C's, and that's your hardest best that you can put in, you're considered achieving. And then we've got this underachieving group right here. This stretches up into the B range. Some of them actually still sometimes get some A's. But that's how the underachieving fits into that category. But let's add the gifted into this. This is an interesting statistic. The achieving gifted don't all get straight A's. I think that that is, our world is so focused on achievement and doesn't recognize that it's not all based on the grade. So achieving gifted kind of mimic this achieving, but getting the A's and B's. But this underachieving gifted can be failing. And these are the ones we're going to be talking about today. And these statistics alarmed me. 30% of high school dropouts tested as gifted. and up to 50% of gifted boys are underachievers. It's kind of sobering, and it's really kind of scary. As the mom of 4 boys, mom of 2 boys, it's really scary to hear that statistic. And they don't really know how to address it. This is the problem. There is really no nationwide, overall, overarching study of how to help the gifted, how to help the underachieving. They know it's a problem, it's very complex, it's extremely baffling. Nobody can really pinpoint exactly why it happens. But I'm going to try to give you a couple of ideas tonight. 30 to 50% of advanced students descend and no longer achieve at their grade level. So not only do 30% of high school dropouts are they gifted, 50% of the gifted never reach back up to their level where they were achieving. And that's what's scary, especially when you hear that from a junior high school principal. You think that they're all okay. But by the time they get to junior high and high school, these underachieving gifted have disappeared down into this group. And you don't know that they're there. And this is the demographic that we're going to address tonight, is this underachieving gifted demographic. Now this is an interesting thing. The National Association for Gifted Children estimates that there are 3 million academically gifted students in K-12 schools. However, federal funding for gifted programs?
0.
Nothing. Not 1 penny. Federal funding was taken away, I don't know how many years ago, several years ago, and they have never reinstated it. Now I want to know what the parents would say if funding for all special education was removed like that. Hey, Katie, come here. What would they do? At your junior high, if they removed all funding for underachieving IEP special education students, what would the parents do? Oh my gosh, it would be in the press, it would be on the news. They're not serving our children. We're failing our children. And what do we do as the parents of these underachieving gifted? We pray they'll go back to where they go. This is an interesting thing that Dawn pointed out to me one time. She explained to me that, I showed you that bell curve. And let's say that in a classroom, this far end of the bell curve doesn't ever make it into the classroom. These are the ones that are in care facilities, are never mainstreamed. But let's say that we're putting in the 85 all the way up to 180 in one classroom. I want you to think about what it's like for you to sit in a classroom of 4-year-olds. Except for Marilee, she doesn't every day. She sits in our classroom of kindergartners. But what is it like for you to try to communicate in a classroom of 4-year-olds or 5-year-olds all day long? They don't understand what you're saying. They don't get your humor. They don't find the same things interesting. The farther up this scale you get, the more you think like that as a child. So let's say that you have a child who is highly gifted in the 145 to 159 range. Somewhere your child fits in there, and they're in a classroom of regular or mildly gifted kids. They feel like they're sitting in a class for special education all day long. And if you move up even higher on the scale, it's even worse. So every bracket that you move up, the harder it is for you to fit into society every single day. Because there's no one who even understands how you think. You may have that one buddy, like you're here in this highly gifted, and you have one buddy who's in the mildly gifted, and you're just happy that he actually knows his times tables. Even though he doesn't really understand how funny it is when you compare, let's say, SpongeBob to King Lear. Because he doesn't get it. At least he knows his times tables. And that's the paradigm they're existing in every single minute of every single day. That's why they get along better with adults, because adults can understand that a little bit better. Okay, this is my intent tonight. Is to help parents understand why many gifted kids underachieve, identify clues that kids are headed down the path of underachievement, and provide sources and ideas on how to help the kids that they love. And I think that's why we're all here. This, I wanted you to look through tonight. This is right here. I forgot to. This is a checklist that you can look through to help identify a gifted underachiever. And as you're reading through this list, I want you to think about either yourself when you were in school, or think about your children. I actually filled this out with my 4th grade son in mind, and checked all the boxes that fit it with him and with his development, and I was shocked to see how many I found. does not function comfortably or constructively in a group of any size. Because nobody thinks the way that he does. When he finds a buddy, like a couple of friends that he has who are extremely gifted, it's so much easier to get along. What about this? Tends to set unrealistic self-expectations. How many of you have gifted kids that are perfectionists? Right there. Goals are too high to achieve or too low, and we're going to be talking about that. Dislikes practice work. Oh my gosh, that's the worst one. Skill for memorization and mastery, that is the worst one for gifted kids. I'm actually doing a case study right now of this. She falls in the profoundly gifted category. She's a 6th grader, and she scored 100%, 99th percentile on the COG in every area.
That was Amber too. And
Just
same problem.
Insane. But you know what she got? F in math. Why is that? She told me, because I sit in the classroom and this is what they do. They tell me the same thing again and again and again and again and again and again and again. She said it just like that, as repeating it as fast as she could. Every single day of their lives in school, and we wonder why they aren't doing their best. How would you feel if you were sitting with those 4-year-olds all day long, every day, and didn't have the power or the communication skills in order to communicate that to people around you? So if you have some time, you might want to fill that out or have your kids fill that out. This is the first question I wanted to talk about. Why do gifted kids underachieve? Why do you think that they do? What are some of your reasons that you think your gifted kids underachieve? Katie has some very on the edges of the spectrum. Kind of explain to us what your kids are like. Because Katie has 8 children.
I have 8, and all of our boys are very high. They all are profoundly gifted, and they struggle with fitting in. They struggle with mostly social things. We kind of put them in college classes just to get them. When my 10-year-old, well, he's 12 now, but we started doing college classes when he was 10. He went into back placer, and that finally gave him something to do. He's in those classes, and he underachieves because it's school. It's to do with school with his friends.
He underachieves in the college classes?
No, in the regular classes.
Oh, okay, in the regular
In
classes.
the college classes, he can be himself. He doesn't matter. I mean, those teachers don't. It's online. Those teachers don't know he's a single kid. So he can fly. He can soar. But when he's in class, he doesn't want to raise his hand anymore. They all know he can do it. He doesn't want to be in the spotlight anymore. He just wants to be home.
Well, so he's in 6th grade or 5th grade?
He's 6th grade now.
6th grade. Okay. Juliana, you have a profoundly gifted son too. I don't know very much about all of your kids, but tell me about your son.
He's now 12. We also did the same thing when he was 10. He takes the class for NCC, and he goes to school, Scottsdale Community. He goes to junior high right now, and high school, and then
How does he do in the regular classroom?
he's but for socially he needs those 2 hours a day. We really wanted that for him, but now I don't know that it's helping anyway. He's so different than that the group of friends that he wants to be with. He does really loves in a group. I mean, I'm looking at this one.
I really wish that somehow, as educators and as parents, we could not only explain to our children that it's okay to be different this way, but somehow we could explain to society that this isn't some sort of a contest and who has the highest number on the scale. It's the way they came, and they need the services that they deserve. And that's the bottom line. I actually had a couple of people read this essay. It was posted online, and his name is Josh Shane. And if you get the reference materials that are back here, it's on there and it's available online. And what this is called, it's called Underachievement from the Inside Out. And I had my oldest boys read this. I had another friend's daughter read this. And they were shocked how accurate it is. And I'm just going to read a couple of excerpts out of it. They're talking about what it feels like to be underachieving all the time. And this man says, he's actually my age now, but he says, it can have very different meanings, not even just as many meanings as there are people, but more than have one meaning per person. It can be very strange. Sometimes it means just your underachievement, your failure to produce the work expected. Sometimes it is your inability to fit in with the other kids, being beaten up, or as they put it, fighting. Sometimes it is your willful disobedience and your refusal to admit that you could do the work if you wanted to. And often as not, it seems to be your own belief that what is important to them is only important to you because it's important to them. He also goes on to say about how frustrated it was for him and how bad it hurt him sometimes to be forced to do this work. It would just hurt him inside when he was very young, especially in first grade, talking about the teachers trying to make him do things, and he physically could not make himself do them. And then he goes on to say, he says, I wonder if all of us can relate to this as parents of the underachieving kid. He says, so they ask you at Christmas time whether your grades are going to be better this term. What are you supposed to say? If you say, no, Mom, actually they're about the same as usual, what is she going to say? Okay, I was just wondering, now we can go off on our pleasant vacation together. It doesn't seem likely to you. Not that it even occurs to you for a minute to do that. That would be absurd. You just assure them it will be better this time. And you hope that it will, and you dread the moment in the vacation when the grades come. But you have a good time anyway while waiting, because at least your list of things that you haven't done isn't getting any longer. And the feeling of dread doesn't start very big at first. It's there, but just a little niggling feeling at first. As the week goes by, or the tension in your stomach grows, every time your mom calls you into another room, you're sure she has found out what your grades really are. Every time the phone rings, you're sure that your dad was home and checked the mail. What's it going to be when they find out this time? Have you all experienced that? I can't even tell you how many times I've kind of lived in that bubble. The report card's going to be different this time. It's going to be different this time. And then it's not. And then I wanted to share this with you. This is written by another profoundly gifted individual. And this person says, it has not escaped my notice that most geniuses have crazy lives. Poets, scientists, artists, any kinds of genius, creative, mathematical, most have a tragic soundtrack paralleling their genius abilities. And I think it's because of this principle I've been talking about, which we're not going to get into. It says, I am one of them. That may sound precocious, but to me it makes a special kind of humility gained through hard experiences to admit that I am disabled in tandem with my enablement. I've always looked at myself as some kind of special. My mental capabilities make me so. But I fail to acknowledge it to this point, despite overwhelming evidence. It is I am more special than I ever thought. Now, this took many years for him to get to that point where he realized he's so different, there's nothing he can do to change him. And I hope that we can teach that to our children, that it's okay. It's okay to be this difference. This is really interesting. Children are complicated. Even our regular, not gifted children are extremely complicated. And untangling underachievement in any child, gifted or not, may be like unraveling a knotted ball of yarn. There's no single isolated cause or effect, but a system where each part affects the other. This is a term I want you to understand. The term is asynchronous development. And basically the gist of it is that your intellect is way above your emotional development. And it's even above your physical development. So let me give you an example. My fourth grader, Micah, fourth grade, little teeny skinny body. His intellect is not at a fourth grade level. I don't know where it is, but let's just say he's at a seventh grade level. So he should be, you'd think, all of him would be operating at a seventh grade level. But emotionally, he operates oftentimes at a first grade level. So that asynchronous development, these areas are all out of sync. And they can't figure out how to make them work, because they should be able to figure it out because they're smart enough and they're old enough, but something just isn't right. And this is extremely common. Have you guys seen this in your kids? Have you seen that in them?
Meltdowns are huge for us. I mean, it's like a 3-year-old tantrum or a 12-year-old will like, and in front of his friends are pulling these at worse. So, and in his mind, he's thinking, oh my gosh, why would I be like this? But in his heart, it's very, I don't know.
It is. Well, and you can't change it. You can't change who they are. Anybody else?
Well, I can't tell you how many times I've said to any one of my 4 older gifted kids, you're smart enough, why can't you figure this out? And it's something simple. And then when you just did that, I'm like, where's Mom?
Okay, I have to tell you that this has been very eye-opening for me, and you may have a couple of moments like that where you want to beat yourself up a little bit.
All day.
Let's just try to do our best. Okay, I think that there are enough of those. There's a brochure. That was one of the things I had to make for my classes, not that I'm really trying to impress you. But in the middle of this, there is a list of characteristics, of typical characteristics of underachieving gifted kids. I didn't keep one with me, but some of them are that they just lack communication skills, or they are uninterested. Here are a couple more. Oh, you know what? I wanted to talk about this first. I forgot this. There's a really fascinating book. I don't think I brought that. No, I did. This is it. If you want to read something really fascinating about learning and learning how to grow talent, it's this book. It's called The Talent Code, and it's by Daniel Coyle. And he talks in this about how we develop skill or develop talent. And one of the things that he talks about is this factor of myelin in our brains. And it says every human movement, a thought or feeling is a precisely timed electrical signal traveling through the chain of neurons, a circle of nerve fibers. So if you touch something hot, it has to go all the way through the neurons into your brain. Myelin is the insulation that wraps these nerve fibers and increases signal strength, speed, and accuracy. The more we fire a circuit, the more myelin optimizes that circuit, and the stronger, faster, and more fluid our movements and thoughts become. And I want you to think about this. I want you to think about how many hours a day your underachieving gifted child spends in school. I actually figured it out. It's 1,080 hours a year. Based on 6 hours a day, 180 days in the school year. So 1,080 hours a day for a year. And they say that it takes 10,000 hours to become a professional at something. If you want to be a pro basketball player, if you want to be a great poet, that's the new thinking, is that you have to do 10,000 hours of practicing and working. And if you've ever watched a video of, you want to watch somebody who's persistent, watch a video of Steve Nash trying to get back on the basketball court. It's unbelievable. Watching him practicing over and over and over and over again. And I want you to think about these circuits in your child's brain as they are sitting in school every day. And they are learning the behavior that school is not important because that's what they get every day. And the more times that repeats, the more times the myelin covers that neuron, and the more that becomes a learned ingrained pattern. And if it takes 10,000 hours, that's 9 years. How long do you end up in school? Let's think about that for a second. That really kind of shook my world a little bit, especially when you think about somebody who's 8 or 9 years old, and they've spent that many hours in public school. It's like a third of their life. And one of the problems in the system, I think, that unless you have an extremely profounded child who is, you know, composing symphonies at 5 or something like that, they're not identified as gifted until maybe you have a great kindergarten teacher. Maybe you've got a great first or second grade teacher before they're actually tested and diagnosed. They've already experienced years of never reaching their ceiling, never being challenged, every single day being bored. And their intellect is trying to increase, but their brain is experiencing these same repetitions every single day. I'd never thought about that, and I thought that that was really interesting. All right, here's some more factors that I discovered as I was studying. Gifted kids learn in clusters. And this is an example of something that I learned with Micah just this week. Micah brought home a paper from school this week. He's in 4th grade. That was fractions and whole numbers, 2 sides. He had an F on the paper. 2.5 out of 5 and 10 out of 20 on this side. Half was the credit for the answers, half was the credit for the work. Okay, everybody's laughing, everybody's shaking their head. We've all been here, right? Okay, now, what was my first reaction? Okay, I've been working on this for how many months? This dealing with gifted kids. I've been dealing with special underachieving gifted kids specifically since the beginning of January. What was my first reaction when this paper landed in my hand?
Knee-jerk reaction.
Yes! What? That was exactly it.
Jenny, you have been trained to act that way.
That's why I've been trained. I've been 23 years. I've been trained.
was that?
You had Tucker first. I did, no, I had Heidi first.
Tucker attests.
Tucker attests. So Tucker's on my cell phone. Oh, Tucker's on over there. I love this. Okay, so that was my first reaction. As we're walking back from the school, I went crazy. Well, I had this paper and a social studies paper that had a D on it. And so I'm looking at this going, oh my God, we've been working on this. What is the problem? And then we got home, and I kind of got my bearings again, and I realized that all the answers were right. So I covered up the answers. And I said, okay, tell me. Bam, 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 bam. He didn't have to show his work. And when I asked him, I said, why did you not show your work? And he said, I don't know how. And why is that? Because he doesn't, it shows up in his brain how to do it. Now, this is a problem with our gifted kids that I have never thought about before. They learn these things in clusters, and they learn this easy math first, So Brad said, okay, well, he can do it. Let's give him a really hard one. So he had 15 over 27 in this really complicated fraction. And Michael melts down into a puddle. He said, I can't do that because I don't know how. And Brad said, this is why it's important that you learn to show your work, because later it's going to get harder. And the problem with these gifted kids is they begin and they miss those early steps. So as by the time they hit 3rd and 4th and 5th grade and junior high, they can't do it in their head anymore, but they've missed the steps in between. And the myelin's already been formed. It's already shown in the pathway how to get there. And what happens when they can't do it? They won't. They won't. And they cannot explain to you why. They can't explain to you why they don't want to do it or why they can't get it. Because they don't know. I would never have known that if I hadn't sat down with him yesterday. So then after we sat down and we showed his work, we figured it out, he did it. Now, it's not going to be perfect from now on. I'm sure this is not going to be a one-time occurrence. Okay, the lack of tools to study and self-regulate. Some of these kids, how many of us have said, you are smart, you should be able to figure that out, how to bring a notebook from school? You are smart enough that you should remember your backpack and your lunchbox, and where your shoes are. Yeah, Brit has a how did you forget your eye thing when she was young. Brit has a fake eye, so she has an excuse. But still, how do you forget your eyeball? She doesn't see it. She doesn't look in the mirror.
Her defense, I missed it too.
She gets me the eye in the car.
I'm just saying.
Wait, where's your eye?
Okay,
Some kid.
all right. So, if you tell it, how many times are you going to tell them you're smart enough to do that? What is the message that they're getting? You're not
You're really not
smart. You're not smart. And how many of these gifted kids identify themselves first and foremost before they're a human being or a brother and sister, or that they are an awesome basketball player or piano player? What is the first thing they say?
I'm smart.
I'm smart. And what do they get from their parents? You can't remember your backpack, so you're dumb. Okay. And another arrow to your heart right there?
Yeah.
I pulled that one out a couple of times this week. Procrastination, disorganization, frustration, and surrender. That surrender, they finally just give up. They don't want to try anymore. This gifted girl that I was talking to you about, I'm doing the case study on, her ELP teacher actually told me that her primary gift, her best gift is critical thinking. She's great at spatial reasoning. Math is her gift. In 5th grade, she got an F in math. And when I showed that to the gifted teacher, she had an audible intake of breath, and I said, how do you explain it? Why does that happen? And I asked her, so what's your favorite subject? She goes, I don't know, math, maybe science. Last night at dinner, we were talking about the difference between exothermic and endothermic energy. She's 11, okay? And they're asking her to figure out the area of the triangle. Frustrating, extremely frustrating. Okay, this is this extraordinary need for attention. This happens a lot too. Now, there's one of my very favorite gifted children in this room who shall remain anonymous, but she has a fake eye. And I remember her, I've known her most of her life, and I consider myself second only in her mothering to her own mother. But I remember her all through elementary school. I don't feel good. Going in and having to spend time at the nurse. And the nurse would have her come in and put a rag on her head. Bring her, okay, go back to class. Why is she supposed to sit? It wasn't real. She was bored to death in class. All right, that happens to our kids, and they get depressed. This next one, perfectionism can be crippling. This is something I was talking about with Tucker the other day. I was explaining to him how he has never truly experienced failure when he gave 100%. I want you to think about Robin or Marilee, one of your kids in your class who was kindergarten, 1st grader, struggling to learn addition. Struggling. It was really, really hard for them. And they kept at it, and they kept at it. How did they feel when they got it finally? Even after they'd failed 25 times. What did they do? Raise their roof.
Yeah.
It is a huge ordeal. Okay, so Mike, or Hiram, who's sitting in his 1st grade class, can already do all these 3 times tables. Everybody else is getting props because they can add 3 plus 5. And Hiram is like, okay. But he's still not giving 100%. He still gets the props because, woohoo, you can do it too. What happens when he gets up to somewhere where he can't do it in his head? And he can't figure it out. He And he won't. Oh, that's because Karen knows Brent, or Kyron. Sheila, anyway. Okay, they don't know what it's like. They don't know what it's like to fail. They have no idea. And so they get up to 4th grade or 5th grade or whenever it hits them.
Or their mission.
Or their mission. Or their
That's when it
mission.
all falls apart for us.
Or their mission. It's different for every single kid. This is why this is so difficult to define. They hit that hard spot where they go, okay, my 25% isn't going to get me through life anymore. I'm going to have to put in 100% now. I never have. It scares me. What if I fail? So then you know what they do? They pull back because they don't want to fail. Because they can't know what it feels like to fail if they don't give 100%. Right?
I actually went to counseling for depression for a while, and the thing that she hit me the most with was, you're a perfectionist, and this is the root of your issue.
It is.
This is why you're failing your college classes. This is why you won't even get
Who
in
would
your
think
car
that an
to go
underachieving
to
child's
class.
problem is perfectionism?
Friend, you're an art major. How are you not passing your classes?
She's afraid to put in her best effort and not have it be good enough.
But what if it's not good enough? And the hardest thing for me to comprehend that I still completely struggle with is she told me the opposite of what anyone has ever told you in your whole life. And excuse me for the language, so this is a direct quote. She says, if it's worth doing, it's worth half-assing. And I said, no. No, that's wrong. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. She said, no.
No, because you're not doing it. Because you're not doing it
Right. I would way rather that you did it,
Exactly.
and you did half of it, or you did a page of it, or you put one brushstroke on this canvas.
And have you give a constructive opinion back.
Right.
And
Then-
have you learned
do
something instead of having you already learned.
Exactly.
Incorrect labeling. I can think of 2 times that I know recently that this has happened. I know that one gifted child that I know was incorrectly diagnosed with autism. I know that my own child, who was struggling with bullying when he was in elementary school, we took him to a counselor, and the counselor had no idea what to do with him. Here is my innocent little 10-year-old son who is being bullied mercilessly at school. And she looked me straight in the eye and she told me, I do not know what to tell you because this is what happens at